The New Year by Edward Thomas, 1878 to 1917. He was the one man I met up in the woods that stormy New Year's morning, and at first sight, 50 yards off, I could not tell how much of the strange tripod was a man. His body, bowed horizontally, was supported equally by legs at one end, by a rake at the other. Thus he rested, far less like a man than his wheelbarrow in profile was like a pig. But when I saw it was an old man bent, at the same moment came into my mind the games at which boys bend thus: High-Cockalorum, or Fly-the-garter, and leapfrog. At the sound of footsteps he began to straighten himself. His head rolled under his cape like a tortoise's. He took an unlit pipe out of his mouth. Politely ere I wished him a happy new year, and with his head cast upward, sideways muttered, so far as I could hear through the trees' roar, "Happy New Year, and may it come fastish too," while I strode by, and he turned to raking leaves. Okay, this poem is by Edward Thomas. Edward Thomas was a journalist. He wrote essays and poems. He was also a novelist. He was Welsh, and unfortunately he was killed during the First World War. So what's this poem about? Well, the title, The New Year. And I think this poem is about somebody walking in the woods. Sounds very like Robert Frost, but he's talking about an encounter with a man who is working with a rake, and it's just a description of the scene and a description of the man, but everything's very mystical. I guess the man is raking leaves, but it isn't defined. The old man has a rake and a wheelbarrow, and then the speaker says Happy New Year to him, and the man with the rake makes a slightly strange comment to him. So the whole scene is a little bit strange. So he was the one man I met up in the woods that stormy New Year's morning. So clearly the speaker, is walking in the woods, and there's stormy weather, there's wind and maybe a bit of rain. Yeah, and it's the 1st of January in the morning. At first sight, 50 yards off, I could not tell how much of the strange tripod was a man. So when he first looked, about 45 meters away, I think he could see that it was a man, but all he could really see was a tripod, and that's this rake and the two legs, but he can't see which part is the man. Yeah. And he doesn't look very much like a man. His body, bowed or bowed, it could be both, bent, curved horizontally, was supported equally by legs at one end and by a rake at the other. A rake is this tool with a handle and a comb at the front, and you use it, and I think this person is raking leaves. And I think this is a very nice description of this man, yeah? That he looks like a tripod and he's bent over horizontally, yeah? And he's supported by two legs and the rake, this strange image. Thus he rested, far less like a man than his wheelbarrow in profile was like a pig. So the man was resting like this in this strange position, but he didn't look very much like a man, and he had a wheelbarrow. And the profile, the side view of the wheelbarrow looked like a pig. So here we have a metaphor. Yeah, oh, sorry, a simile, was like a pig. But he didn't look very much like a man. The wheelbarrow looked much more like a pig. So, but when I saw it was an old man bent, at the same moment came into my mind the games at which boys bend thus. So clearly here, at first, he didn't actually recognize that this strange tripod shape was a man. But when he saw it was a man, a thought came into his mind, and he was thinking about games where boys bend over like this. And then he mentions High-Cockalorum or Fly-the-garter and leapfrog. These are all games where one person bends over and somebody runs from behind, puts their hands on their back, opens their legs and jumps over. And these are all leapfrog types of leapfrog games. Yeah, and this is where you bend over. So the speaker, he suddenly has this thought of boys playing games from the position of the man. At the sound of footsteps, he began to straighten himself. So this man straightens up. He's bent over and he straightens up because he can hear somebody walking by. He rolled his head. His head rolled under his cape like a tortoise's. So his head, it didn't move from side to side. It was like a ball rolling. And he had a cape, so something to keep off the rain. Yeah, and the head, it looked like the head of a tortoise coming out of a shell. And this is a lovely simile. So the cape, the coat, the cover is like the shell of a tortoise, and the head is coming out from underneath. He took an unlit pipe out of his mouth. So he had a pipe in his mouth, but it wasn't lit, and he took it out of his mouth. Politely ere I wished him a happy new year. So after this I wished him happy new year. This is the traditional greeting. And with his head cast upwards sideways, so he's still rather bent, muttered. So his head is looking upwards and it's looking sideways, and he muttered. So he didn't say clearly. Yeah, I think maybe this man with the rake is very much in his own thoughts or his own world. I think he's rather suspicious of the speaker. And he muttered, so far as I could hear through the trees roar, Happy New Year, and may it come fastish too. So I couldn't hear very clearly because the wind was roaring in the trees, and this is more of the description of the scene. And this man says, Happy New Year, and may it come fastish too. So I think this phrase that the man uses is a bit enigmatic. My interpretation of it is a happy new year to you, but I want the happy bit to come quickly. Yeah, because I've got problems and I'm not happy. And I get the feeling that the man with the rake is saying things aren't good for me at the moment, and may the happy bit of Happy New Year come quickly. While I strode by, so while I strode, I walked fast. So he said this to me, and then he turned to raking leaves. So he's raking up the leaves and putting them in the wheelbarrow. So this poem is a description of this scene with somebody walking in the woods, and there's this strange shape, and it turns out to be an old man, a man with a rake. It doesn't say he's old, but I get the feeling he is. And it's a description of the scene and the old man and the whole situation. So, enough. If you enjoyed the video, give it a rating, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you soon. Bye for now. The New Year by Edward Thomas.